Hello, my name is Siri Gamage from Northern Railway Defenders Forum. Today I'd like to speak about this bill presented by Minister Sam Farraway to the Upper House on 21st of June. It is called Bill within brackets Rail Trails and Roads to amend Transport Administration Act 1988. This bill is important for those of us who live in regional New South Wales because what it plans to do is to provide more powers to the minister to decide which rail trail or which road can be constructed on non-operational rail lines in regional New South Wales. At the moment, probably you are aware that if any council wants to go ahead with the rail trail, the government has to present an amendment act to the parliament and get it approved, special act, so that some changes can be made to the original Transport Administration Act. But if this current bill is passed, that will no longer be required because the minister will then have power to determine which rail trail or road even can be constructed on non-operational rail lines in regional New South Wales. I had a close look at this bill and also the minister's public interest statement, and can identify several areas where we have some concerns. Firstly, the bill is discriminatory towards rail services because it doesn't give equal status to roads and rails or trains. What it does is it proposes to give rail corridor land to specific councils for up to 30 years to operate a rail trail or a cycle track or even a road going across the rail line. And obviously for the purpose of constructing these roads or rail trails, the existing rail tracks will be removed. So that is another stipulation. So in our view, meaning Northern Railway Defenders Forum, which I represent, in our view, this is not the way to go about introducing changes to the Transport Administration Act, because this will delay or prevent any proposals for heritage or tourism trains, on one hand, proposed by community organizations, or even freight lines, freight trains proposed by private sector in any of these non-operational rail lines. So the bill presented by Minister Farraway does not talk about these things. It only talks about facilitating the construction of rail trails and roads even on non-operational rail lines. Secondly, this amendment bill goes against some of the core principles or core objectives of the original bill, Transport Administration Bill. For example, original bill talks about the need for integrating transport services in the region, in regional New South Wales, whereas this Minister Farraway's bill excludes future rail construction of rail services for either for freight or passenger trains or tourism trains. Actually, at this point, I like to point out that the New South Wales government doesn't have any plans to renew regional rail, unlike Victoria, for the next 30 years in their own plans. So therefore, I mean, even though this bill and the statement of public interest mention that the rail corridor will be available for future rail proposals, it doesn't make any sense to us because the government itself doesn't have any plans to introduce rail services in the regions by using these non-operational rail lines. Whereas in various localities or council areas, there are plans by community organizations for heritage or tourist trains, and some businesses want to use the rail line for freight. And the bill doesn't mention anything or make reference to how the government will handle such proposals for introducing freight or tourism trains. So in our view, this bill, when it talks about regional transport, it in fact excludes rail services, which was the very idea of the original Transport Administration Act. So it is lopsided, and it seemed to discriminate future rail services, and it only wants to facilitate or accelerate decision making in relation to rail trails and roads. So therefore, we are not in favor of significantly amended or even opposed by the members of Legislative Council, or even the members of Legislative Council can decide to refer it to a parliamentary inquiry, in which case we all can make our own submissions about this bill and its aims. And also we have a concern about the parliamentary oversight about these kind of decisions, because if this bill is passed, the decision-making power transfers from the parliament to the executive, meaning the minister. So it's a kind of administrative kind of decision which will happen. And in which case there can be all kinds of influences on decision making. Whereas if it remains with the parliament, then of course there can be a wide-ranging debate among the parliamentarians in the upper house and the lower house, and then people can also approach these parliamentarians in their own electorates and inform their concerns or their constructive suggestions and so on. So on behalf of Northern Railway Defenders Forum, we have communicated our concerns and constructive suggestions to the members of Parliament, in particular members of the Legislative Council. One of the suggestions we make is that rather than tearing up existing rail lines, the government should and the council's concern should explore the possibility of using these rail corridors as for multiple purposes. Like in the case of Parramatta Light Rail, they are building a light rail line as well as a cycle path from Parramatta to Carlingford as a kind of a dual corridor. And in Byron Bay Council is exploring the same idea for their own area. And actually this multi-use rail corridor concept is the most up-to-date concept in transport economics also. I recently read an article about it, research article. So we have nothing against councils in New England area, for example, constructing rail trails. Actually, they can be very beneficial. But the thing is, in this day and age, we need to be smart and creative when thinking about these kind of public assets and how best we can use. Imagine in the New England area, imagine we have both a rail trail as well as a heritage train. going from Armidale to Gaira and Glen Innes. So we can have a win-win situation in that case. So I would like you to pay some attention to this particular bill and its implications for future rail proposals in particular, and also the debate coming up in the upper house after August 9th, when this bill will be taken up for discussion. Thank you.